We've had three of the top so-called four players, and there could be more, but the ones that you know about are three, and they're all different and exceptional in their own way. Two of the players we've had in so far, Emmanuel Mudiay and D'Angelo Russell, obviously are guards. One played at a high level in college and Ohio State, and the other one didn't play much this year. Played in China and in limited minutes. And of course, the player we had in today won a national championship at 6'11", and he's a different position. I thought all of them, played really hard and played to their strengths. Varying degrees of experience, and of course different positions.
Mitch, what's impressed you most about the guys that you've met with off the court?
Well, we've had two meetings, informal meetings. The basketball operations staff, takes out the prospect, for dinner, and then the next night the coaching staff takes out the same prospect. All three of the players very polite, well-mannered, hearty appetites, for sure. And mature kids. It's different, different than it used to be. I mean, the kids, they're 19 years old. Of course, going back in the dark ages, everybody that graduated from college was 22, 23 years old. But you're dealing with now 19-year-old young men, but they've grown up differently too. They're far more mature at 19 than, let's say, I was or somebody else was 30 years ago at 19. So it's impressive to be around them. Of course, they get good tutoring and good advice from their representatives and their families. It's rare when you'll have a bad meeting or dinner or social gathering. But having said that, if you have 3 or 4 people there from basketball operations, everybody gets a different take on a kid, and you can usually get a good feel after a couple hours.
Mitch, what do you look for when they come in to work out for you guys? What are you trying to see from those players?
Well, these 3 workouts, are more difficult than the other workouts. At this position, when you're dealing with players that could get drafted 1, 2, 3, or 4. A lot of times the representatives dictate what you can do and what you can't do. Now we run the workout, our coaches do, but all 3 of the players that we just mentioned did not want to work out against anybody. Now little did they know that we had Mark Matson here, who is a willing player on the court, Larry Lewis and Thomas Scott, but Mark against the big guys, is a formidable opponent. So it's tough when you're doing one-on-solo workouts. There's really so much you can do. It's a little bit easier for a big player because you could look at post moves, and you can do a little bit of 2-on-2 and pick and rolls and seeing how players pass out of the post and how comfortable they are on the post. For a guard, it's tougher because you can't get a feel of the open court, how they are in terms of making plays. 2-on-2 with 3 Laker employees. If you're a ball handling guard, you can just show so much. So I think it's easier for a big player to show what he can do than it is for 2 guards.
After seeing what you have of these players, has your decision become even more difficult or a little bit easier?
Well, I think we're getting a comfort level. We've scouted these players, I can't say for years because they've only been in college 1 year. And we may have seen them in the Hoop Summit or in the McDonald's game, but really it's 1 year. And we've seen them multiple times. So you think you know them, but until you get them up close, until you interview them, put them through workouts, stand 10 feet away for an hour and a half and watch them work, that's when you get a good feel. Our comfort level with the 3 players right now is very good.
How many more workouts do you think you'll have that you would consider for number 2?
There's a workout this weekend in Las Vegas for one of the European players that will attend. There's another European player or 2 that I don't know will make it over in time for a workout. Other than that, we have nothing else planned.
Mitch, what are you hoping with? We're building a team around the number 2 pick. Philosophically, big man or guard, what's in today's NBA, what do you see philosophically?
Well, you go back to the Elijah Wan Bowie Jordan draft. And you know, in years past and maybe even today, it makes sense to build around a big. But you don't want to take a big because it's a big and then pass on the number 3 pick, which turned out to be Michael Jordan. So we're going to look at the bigs. We want to look at the guards and see if there's a guard there that, you know, despite being just a guard, you know, you don't want to miss and pass on him because he's not a big.
But can you build a team around a guard that way? I suppose if it's a Michael Jordan type of guy, obviously.
Absolutely, and it can be argued in today's game that maybe you should do that. You know, if you watch the team, if you watch Golden State play, and you know, you watch, you know, a lot of the teams in the NBA, the Conleys and the Currys, you know, Parker and, you know, Harden, you know, there's Chris Paul. You can argue that, you know, maybe the way to go is with a guard.
But then some folks would say, well, you got Jordan Clarkson in the second round. Could you get that kind of a guy in the second round if he was a big?
Say that again?
You know, people would argue, well, you could get a guy like Jordan Clarkson. You got him in the second round. Could you get a big that has that kind of impact in the second round?
No, you're not going to get a big like him or the other 2 or 3 bigs in the top. You're not going to get them in the second round.
What do you?
And if you do, I mean, the Clippers got DeAndre Jordan.
That's a one.
Okay, and he was in the 30s.
Yeah.
That does not happen very often.
What do you hope to do with Towns before the draft?
We'd like to get him in, schedule him, and get him into this facility for a workout. To date, we have been unsuccessful in doing that, but we've got another 2.5 weeks. I'm sure we can get it done.
In regards to Okafor, the biggest knock has been his defense. What have you seen, and do you think he's going to be able to transition to the NBA on that level?
It's tough out here. You know, he's going against, you know, Mark Madsen, Larry Lewis, and Thomas Scott. You know, at Duke, they only had 8 or 9 guys on the team, so there was a conscious effort, I think, to make sure he did not get in foul trouble and, you know, contest a lot of shots or contest his own man shot or be overly aggressive, because if he got in foul trouble, they had nobody to go to. I think literally they couldn't practice for most of the year because they only had 8 guys on the team. So that could be a factor. But, you know, having said that, I think if there's a part of his game that lags another part of its game, it would be his defensive presence on the court.
Given how you said the league has become so guard-centric, does it make a skilled big that much more valuable, or there's just that fewer of those guys around?
I think you need both. You know, I think you need shooters too. If you have a big guy that could have a presence down in the paint, you know, if you don't have shooters, they're going to collapse on them, and you're going to have a problem there. You know, we like Jordan Clarkson. You know, he was a good player this year on a very bad team, so I don't know how that's going to play out, but we think he has a future. But we also think he can play with, you know, one of these guards in the draft too. Jordan is not a prototypical ball-handling point guard. You know, he'll make plays for other players on the team, but by and large, he looks to attack first, you know, offensively, whether it's to get to the rim or look for his shot. You know, that'll change as he goes forward, but we could pick another guard to play with, you know, Jordan and feel comfortable.
Typically, how long does it take for a big to progress in the NBA versus a guard?
Well, bigs typically have been slower to develop, and that's you know, you can argue why is that, and you know, my theory is big players, you know, kind of get selected to play the game because they're big, and they're taught to play the game, and then they learn to love the game. Whereas a lot of other players, when they're 4 and 5 years old, they just pick up a ball and they just love to play the game. So I think as a byproduct, big players, not always, but by and large, are later to develop.
What degree will that factor in?
Well, you know something, they're all 19. You know, even the European players. You know, I don't want to say that we're only looking at 6 guys that are all 19, but by and large, the top 8 or 9 players, most of them are 19 years old, so they're all going to be to develop. Take time.
But someone like Okafor seems a little bit more developed as a big guy than the typical big guy coming in. I mean, he seems like he has a more polished NBA game coming in.
I think offensively, you know, what he does on the court would translate quickly to the NBA.
Mitch, how do you factor in the workout in comparison to the body of work that you see on the floor at Duke?
That's always a challenge, you know, not to be swayed by these workouts. Fortunately, we are allowed to bring them back one more time. You're allowed to bring in a player for one 24-hour period and a player for one 48-hour period. So the 3 players we brought in, they've been here one time, and we can bring them back. But you don't want to forget what you've watched, for the whole year. I mean, at our dinner last night with our scouts and Okafor, we went through the scouts, and several scouts, have each seen him 4 or 5 times. So in that room last night, including myself, we've probably seen him 15 to 18 times in 1 year as a freshman. So you think you know him, but you don't want to forget, what you've watched and just be biased by what you see today.
Are these dinners and time you're spending with him vital to get to know the kind of person that he is, to get a feel for who he is as a man?
Well, quite frankly, the most important thing is, the ability to play the game. Okay, and then you want, somebody that you feel comfortable with in terms of character, representation, upbringing, understanding of the game. Those things are important too. But to get a guy that's a great kid that can't play doesn't help us.
Mitch, can your decision be the history of the Lakers whenever they have a championship team that has always been a dominant big man?
It's an argument that's a good argument, and we'll have to see how that plays out. I mean, we have a lot of photos in this building, and a lot of those jerseys over there have a lot of big men that we've retired and we've had great success with. Once again, it's debatable. Is Golden State going to win? Is Cleveland going to win? Neither team really has a dominant center, so you don't have to get to the finals with a dominant center. You can clearly do it without a dominant center. But we've had great success with dominant centers.
Factor in Kobe's personality, talent, experience. What impact can that make on whoever you pick at number 2?
I don't think it's that big a factor. Kobe is going to have a presence in training camp. And I'm sure he'll try to impart, his approach to the game on the players in camp. He's never been great with rookies, and rookies have come to expect, Kobe's glare, Kobe's, ignoring them in the locker room and, saying things. But rookies do need to go through that. They don't need to, carry the basketballs or the projector like we did 30 years ago. But they do have to understand that, although they've signed contracts and they've been drafted high, this is a gift to be in this league, and they have to earn whatever they get. At the very worst, Kobe is going to impart, a work ethic in training camp that will be beneficial to any player we bring on board.
On the flip side, what do you think this young core of players can do for Kobe?
Well, I think they could, make it fun for him again. Julius Randle is still an untested rookie. We're hoping that he can play in summer league and play well. We talked about Jordan Clarkson. If we can get another, player that can play the game and contribute right away. And then we have a lot of, flexibility in free agency this summer. So I'd hate to go into training camp with just rookies and Kobe. I would hope to add a veteran or 2 during the summer. If that's the case, I think we'd have a nice mix.
Mitch, is there a consensus within the organization what you guys should do with that number 2 pick, or is that still being discussed? Is there a debate going on?
It doesn't have to be a consensus. Really, it's going to be, my decision, with the support of ownership, and I report directly to Jimmy. And that's how we'll do it. I mean, I'll talk to our scouts, and Jimmy and I will talk. We talk every day. And he'll give his opinion. It's rare when we have varying opinions, and I know basically in the last 3 workouts our opinions are very similar to each other, so I don't expect anything to be different. But we don't take a vote, and whatever the vote comes out to be, that's what we do. It's helpful to poll your scouts, and we spend hours in the room, doing, votes, so to speak, on these 5 players. How do you rank them? But at the end of the day, somebody has to be accountable, and for better or for worse, that would be me.
With that said, do you know what you want to do? I mean, do you have a sense of what you want to do?
No, not yet at all. Not yet at all. Like I said, we still would like to bring in, another player or two, and in more than likelihood we'll revisit these players one more time in this building.
Are you more or less likely now, after seeing a few workouts, to do something with the number 2 pick other than just pick it?
No, everything's still on the table.
Okafor is so young. Is he even aware of your North Carolina roots, and did you have any discussions about that?
Yeah, he is today.
You had to tell him?
Well, he came up last night at dinner several times.
Was he aware? Was he aware about that?
I think he was. Yeah. Yeah, he was. I think his agents prepped him for that.
So, what sort of discussions did you have about that today?
Well, I talked to him about the time that they were down. We were down 8 points with 16 seconds to go. My sophomore year in college, and it was at North Carolina. And of course he said, well, Duke won. I said, no, Duke did not win. He said, you scored 8 points in 16 seconds. I said, yes, we did, and we won in overtime, and there was no 3-point shot.
So he was impressed with that.
He knew the story, but I wanted to make sure he heard it from me.
Will his roots be held against him?
What's that?
Will his roots be held against him?
His roots?
Yeah.
Well, he's from Chicago.
I mean, in terms of going to Duke.
It's not a plus.
A couple of the top prospects are not really great shooters. How much of an issue is that, and how confident are you that you can get, that's something that you guys can address?
A couple of top prospects? What do you mean?
Well, you want me to name them?
How else can I answer the question?
Well, you've named 4. A couple of the top 4 or 5 prospects are not great shooters. There's free throw issues. There's 3-point issues.
Yeah.
Is that something that you? How much do you weigh that?
You know, the only player. I mean, they're all varying talents, and nobody has. And the expression is a broken shot. Mm-hmm. So I don't think that's a concern. I really don't. I've seen many broken shots in the league that really, if they're at a certain age, you cannot correct it. I don't see that with any of the 3 players that we brought in to date.
Okay.
Now I know, some shoot better than others, and there's some rumors that maybe 1 or 2 of them don't shoot as well as the others. Mm-hmm. But I don't have a concern, that 3 or 4 years down the road they won't be excellent shooters. That's not a concern.
Does your instinct tell you that there is a potentially franchise-changing player in this draft, or is it still too early to tell?
I think it's a little early to tell. The last time there was one, and I don't want to say something, I don't want to misspeak. I mean, clearly LeBron, the hype, 10 years ago, I remember, about this kid. And when we saw him, it was just so clear that, this guy could change the game right away. And I may have made a mistake because I don't have a list in front of me for the last 10 years. Am I missing somebody? Anthony Davis, maybe, but LeBron, you can just tell. And I don't know who the other first picks were, without a list in front of me.
Griffin.
Dwight.
Blake, Dwight. They're all there, but nobody like LeBron. Okay. And if you've watched the game 2 nights ago, that's no secret. So can either one of these guys, they're 19, and they're only going to get better.